My husband and I were struggling, but this time he humiliated me in front of his boss, belittling my career. "You're just a housewife with a laptop," he snickered as everyone laughed. "No wonder you never got promoted," his manager smirked. I just sat there frozen. For days later, I was trending. They were scrambling to apologize. It was the company dinner. One of those formal, high-floor restaurant events where everyone's drinking overpriced wine and pretending they're more successful than they are. Brent's company had just landed a new contract with a major West Coast firm. Big money. Big celebration. I was invited as a spouse, which, according to Brent, was more of a formality. "We'll be out by 10, he said while fixing his collar in the mirror. Just smile and laugh at Craig's stories. Craig was his manager. Loud. The type who always called waiters buddy. Brent idolized him, even though Craig had passed him over for promotion twice in the last year. I didn't say much in the car. I was distracted by the launch I had the next day, the biggest contract I'd ever handled since going independent. After stepping down from my full-time job during the pandemic, I'd rebuilt my career from scratch. What started as a few side clients turned into a full-on consulting business in digital branding. From my living room. While raising our son. And somehow, that never felt like enough to Brent. We pulled into the valet lane at Canlis, and I felt that nervous flutter in my chest. Not because of the people. Because of Brent. Because I didn't know which version of him would show up tonight, the charming one who used to brag about me, or the one who flinched every time I mentioned work. At dinner, it didn't take long for the wine to start flowing and the jokes to get looser. I was seated between Brent and Lana, his coworker's wife. She was a dermatologist, sharp and chatty. I liked her immediately. The conversation bounced between real estate prices, vacation homes, someone's Tesla order. I tried to contribute, but the rhythm of the table felt like a treadmill I couldn't quite keep pace with. Then Craig leaned across the table, wine glass in hand, smirking like a man who loved hearing himself talk. "So, Celine," he said. "Brent tells us you're doing, what is it? Online stuff now?" I gave a polite smile. "I do digital brand consulting. Mostly small businesses and startups." "Oh, got it," he said, dragging out the vowels like I'd just told him I sold scented candles in my basement. "So you're basically freelancing? Must be nice, working in pajamas." Brent laughed. A little too loud. "Yeah. She's a housewife with a laptop. She gets to nap between emails." There was that pause. That 3-second pause where everyone decides whether to laugh or pretend they didn't hear it. Craig chuckled. "No wonder she never got promoted." And then it happened. Everyone laughed. Even Lana, though hers felt nervous. Brent didn't even look at me. I just sat there, frozen, holding my fork like I was waiting for someone to cue the music and tell me it was a prank. No one did. I smiled faintly, nodded, and looked down at my plate. My dessert, some kind of deconstructed lemon tart, had already gone warm. The room spun slightly. I excused myself to the bathroom not because I needed to go, but because I needed to breathe. In the mirror, under the flattering bathroom lights and the white marble counters, I stared at my reflection and realized something. I wasn't sad. I was furious. Furious at him. At myself. At all the times I'd laughed off the small comments. At how many pieces of myself I'd shelved to make his life easier. At the fact that I was standing in a $60 restaurant bathroom while the man I married used me as a punchline. I didn't say a word on the way home. Brent didn't either. He knew. We didn't talk the next day. Or the day after that. I dove into my work. My campaign, for a sleek little finance startup called MintMind, went live that Tuesday. By noon, it was being shared on X, Twitter, whatever. By Wednesday morning, one of the influencers we'd partnered with, a 24-year-old financial YouTuber, dropped a video breaking down the campaign, calling it cleaner than Apple's last 3 launches. Thursday, I woke up to 200 plus DMs. Forbes Women had featured the launch in their What's Working in Startup Marketing newsletter. My client forwarded me the blurb. I reread it 3 times before letting myself cry in the kitchen. But the real kicker? Someone had recorded the dinner table conversation. Just a short clip, Brent's voice, clear as day, calling me a housewife with a laptop, followed by Craig's, "No wonder she never got promoted." It hit TikTok on Thursday night. No one tagged us, but people found me anyway. My name, my business page, my work, everything. The caption? "This housewife just made a startup go viral in 3 days." Men will literally humiliate their wives out loud before doing a single Google search. It exploded. 2 million views. Then 5. By Friday afternoon, I had emails from brands I'd pitched to 6 months ago who'd ghosted me. Now they wanted strategy sessions. Brent came home early that night. He stood in the doorway holding grocery store roses and looking about 10 years older than he had on Monday. "We need to talk," he said. I just stared at him. "They saw the video," he said. "Craig's furious. He said it's a PR problem." I wanted to laugh. Of course Craig was worried about PR. Not the fact that he laughed at a woman doing real work, not the fact that he belittled someone at his table. No, image was the issue. Brent continued, "I didn't mean it like that. I was just joking." "No," I said calmly, "you meant it." He blinked. "I didn't expect it to blow up." No. Of course he didn't. He expected me to take it, quietly, like I always had. But this time? The internet didn't let me. He asked if I wanted to clear the air publicly. Maybe post a joint statement. I told him to leave. He slept at a hotel that night. By Sunday, I was meeting with a lawyer. I wasn't ready to say divorce yet. But I was done protecting someone who never protected me. More importantly, I was finally protecting myself. The next few weeks moved fast, not just emotionally, but logistically. I barely had time to process what was happening between Brent and me because work had kicked into overdrive. Every time I opened my inbox, there was another inquiry. Another request for a consult. Another LinkedIn message starting with, "Saw your recent campaign, would love to collaborate." It was surreal. This wasn't luck. It was 4 years of working after Max went to bed. Of taking Zoom calls with a toddler on my hip. Of piecing together client decks between school pickups and grocery runs. It was real work. Work that no one saw. Work Brent dismissed as just messing around on Canva. And suddenly, now that it was trending, it was legitimate. My name was being spoken in rooms I used to beg to get into. Brent was spinning. He started doing things he hadn't done in years. Coming home early. Offering to cook dinner. Asking me how my day went, with too much effort in his voice, like he was trying to say the right thing for the first time in months. But the thing is, I'd changed. My responses were polite, brief. I didn't update him on my meetings or my client calls. I didn't volunteer excitement. And he felt it. One night, about a week after the video went viral, I was working late in the home office when he came in and sat on the edge of the desk. He looked tired. Not the kind of tired you fix with sleep. The kind that settles in when your ego finally shuts up and lets the truth in. "I've been thinking about what I said at dinner," he said. "And I know sorry doesn't really cut it." I didn't say anything. I just kept typing. He continued, slower this time. "I felt like I was losing. I don't know, my place. At work. At home. And then seeing you just, taking off. It made me feel small." I stopped typing. That was the most honest thing he'd said in a long time. But instead of dealing with that, he said, looking down at his hands, "I tore you down to feel better." That part hit me. Because I knew it was true. He hadn't always been like this. But somewhere along the way, he'd started measuring his worth by how much more he made than me, how many people respected him, how many times I said yes without pushing back. He didn't marry a quiet woman, but he'd tried to turn me into one. I finally said, I don't need an apology, Brent. I needed a partner. And you stopped showing up as one a long time ago. He nodded, quietly. I know. I could tell he was hoping I'd add something. Maybe an opening. Some hint that we could fix it. But I didn't. Instead, I got up, walked past him, and turned off the lights on my way out of the office. That weekend, I took Max to the Pacific Science Center. Just me and him, like we used to do when Brent worked Saturdays. We ate hot dogs from a food truck and sat on the steps watching the fountain show. He asked why Dad hadn't come. I just said he was busy. Kids don't need the full truth. They need stability. And I was finally starting to feel like I could give him that, on my own terms. By the third week, I'd signed 2 new retainer clients and was speaking on a podcast about women reclaiming the word freelancer. Freelance isn't code for unemployed, I said during the interview. It's code for self-made. That line got clipped and posted. It went semi-viral. Not explosive like the dinner video, but enough to start new conversations in the spaces I cared about. Spaces that had always felt just out of reach, until now. Meanwhile, Brent started changing his tone. At first it was guilt. Then confusion. Then, subtle bitterness. He didn't like that I was unbothered. He didn't like that I wasn't engaging in long conversations about us or what we could fix. He started leaving little digs again, softer this time, almost like he was testing to see if the old me was still in there. You've really gone all in on this boss lady thing, huh? I guess now you don't have time for family dinners? You used to care more about being present than being powerful. That last one stayed with me. Because for so long, I had equated presence with sacrifice. As if being a good mother, a good wife, meant always choosing them first. Always putting my needs, my dreams, my career on a shelf. But now? I'd learned that being present for others didn't mean erasing yourself. And I had no intention of disappearing again. One morning, while I was getting ready for a Zoom panel, Brent lingered in the hallway, watching me apply lipstick. You're different now, he said, arms crossed. I met his gaze in the mirror. No. I'm finally the same woman I used to be. You just stopped seeing her. He didn't respond. I finished getting ready and closed the door gently behind me. By the time April rolled in, I was invited to be a keynote speaker at a Women in Tech Summit in San Francisco. The theme was building from scratch. It felt poetic. Brent didn't ask if he could come. He knew better. Instead, he emailed me, from his work address 2 days before the event. The subject line said, "Opportunity to collaborate." I opened it and stared at the body of the email for several seconds. It was short. Awkward. He asked if I might be interested in consulting with his firm. Said they were revisiting their digital strategy. Craig had probably pushed him to send it. I didn't reply. Not out of spite, but because it didn't deserve a response. This wasn't me being cruel. It was me recognizing that the version of me they tried to mock had outgrown them completely. I'd finally stepped into my own story, and I wasn't about to hand the pen back. The summit in San Francisco felt like a different planet. Not just because I was hundreds of miles from Seattle, but because for the first time in years, I wasn't there as someone's guest. I wasn't a +1. I wasn't Mrs. Brent something. I was the name on the poster. The venue was one of those restored warehouses near the Embarcadero, all exposed brick and natural light and people who genuinely seemed excited to be there. Women in smart blazers and sneakers, carrying iced coffees, exchanging real ideas instead of small talk. When I walked into the green room, the event coordinator smiled and handed me a speaker badge with my name in bold black letters, Celine Dorsey, founder, Dorsey Digital. That badge hit harder than it should have. Maybe because I remembered the early days. The consulting gigs that paid $200 and ate up 30 hours of my week. The nights I stayed up watching SEO tutorials while Brent asked why I didn't just go back to an office job. And now, here I was, in a lineup that included a startup founder who'd raised $30 million and a former Google VP. I was supposed to speak second, right after the keynote. I stood off stage, watching the first speaker, a woman named Zia who'd built a fintech platform from her garage. As she wrapped up her story with a quote about resilience, I felt this strange heat rise in my chest. Not nerves. Not fear. Something like clarity. It was my turn. The host introduced me with a short blurb. Up next is Celine Dorsey, founder of Dorsey Digital, whose recent work has not only gone viral, but reshaped how brands think about authenticity and storytelling. Her talk today? Building without permission. The crowd clapped. I stepped up to the mic. I didn't start with slides. I didn't start with metrics. I told them a story. About how I left my full-time job to take care of my son. About how the world called it stepping down, even though I'd been climbing the whole time, just in a direction no one bothered to look. I told them how my own husband had laughed at my work in a room full of strangers. And how, for days later, that same work made his boss beg me for a call. There was a pause after I said it, that kind of electric silence where you can feel every person in the room holding the same breath. Then, applause. Not polite. Real. After the talk, women came up to me with tears in their eyes. A retired teacher who'd started a tutoring business. A single mom launching a skincare line from her kitchen. A woman who hadn't posted on LinkedIn in 2 years because her ex told her no one cared what she had to say. They cared now. And more importantly, they believed now. Later that night, back in my hotel room overlooking the bay, I ordered room service and sat barefoot on the windowsill, just staring out at the water. Brent texted again. Proud of you. That was it. No call. No mention of us. Just those 3 words. I didn't reply. Not because I didn't feel anything, but because I didn't owe him my reaction anymore. The truth is, that dinner, the humiliation, the quiet smirks, the way he used my work as a punchline, it had done something to me. It cracked open a part of me I didn't know was still fighting to be seen. And once it opened, I couldn't shut it again. Back in Seattle, things were quieter. The media buzz started to settle. The viral video lost traction, like they all do. But the impact didn't fade. I got an email from the city's Chamber of Commerce asking if I'd be interested in speaking at a small business mentorship series. They'd seen the Forbes article. They wanted real stories. Not the polished ones. The messy, climb out of a hole kind. I said yes. I started mentoring 2 younger women in marketing. One was a new mom, just like I had been. The other had recently left her job at a big agency because she felt invisible. I told them both what I wish someone had told me years ago: you don't need someone else to validate your work for it to matter. Build it anyway. Build it without permission. Brent and I still lived under the same roof, technically. For Max. For now. But everything was different. We were co-parents. Not partners. He seemed to sense it too. There were fewer attempts at affection. He'd started asking if he should stay somewhere else on the weeks you're busy. At first, I appreciated the space. Then I started realizing he wasn't offering space, he was backing away, slowly, hoping I'd ask him not to. But I didn't. Instead, I filled that space with everything I'd once put on pause: my work, my voice, my peace. One night, as I was sorting through client contracts at the kitchen counter, Max came in holding one of my old notebooks, the kind I used to scribble marketing ideas in back when I wasn't sure anyone would hire me again. "Mom," he said, flipping through the pages, "did you make all this stuff yourself?" I smiled. "Yeah. Every piece." He stared at it for a second, then said something I'll never forget: "That's cool. I want to do that too when I'm older. Work for myself." He said it so simply, so matter of fact, like it was obvious that this was something to admire. And in that moment, all the comments, all the dismissals, all the nights I questioned myself, they faded into the background. Because that's the thing about reclaiming your voice. Once you use it, it echoes in the people watching you. Even the little ones. A few weeks after the summit, I was invited to attend a private networking brunch hosted by a well-known venture capital group in Seattle. It was invite-only, mostly women, mostly founders, with a few investors sprinkled in who were finally figuring out that women-led startups weren't just cute side projects, they were profitable. The invitation came through someone I'd met during a panel, a quiet powerhouse named Priya who ran a sustainability-focused supply chain consultancy. She messaged me, "You need to be in this room. Come." It was held in a converted loft space in Capitol Hill, all exposed beams and hanging plants and catered avocado toast. The kind of place that looked like it was designed by Pinterest itself. I remember walking in and realizing no one looked nervous. These weren't women trying to prove themselves. They knew they belonged. And somehow, they welcomed me in like I did too. At one point during the brunch, a woman named Harper, early 40s, crisp white blazer, ran a consumer insights firm, leaned in and asked, "So what's next for you? I mean, you've already built the thing. What's the next mountain?" I didn't answer right away. Because for the first time in a long time, I wasn't chasing something to prove my worth. I was building with clarity. With calm. With power that didn't come from anyone else's approval. I told her, honestly? The next mountain is building in a way that doesn't cost me myself. She smiled like she understood exactly what I meant. That night, back at home, I opened Brent's laptop by accident. We had both been working at the kitchen table. I thought it was mine. His was left open to a Slack thread, his team's group chat, and I saw a message from Craig. "Has your wife stopped dragging our name through the mud yet? Or is she still building her empire of shade?" I stared at it for a long moment. Not because I was hurt. Because I wasn't surprised. Brent had minimized my work when it was just quiet progress. Then mocked it when it became noticeable. Now that it was too big to ignore, he was trying to play victim to the consequences of his own words. I closed the laptop and didn't say anything to him. He came in an hour later. Tired, rubbing his forehead. "Long day," he mumbled. I didn't respond. I didn't need to. That silence? That was the space where I used to shrink myself to make him comfortable. I wasn't doing that anymore. The next week, Max had a parent-teacher conference. Brent and I went together. He drove. We made small talk about Max's science project, how he was into volcanoes now, how he kept trying to build one in the kitchen sink. When we arrived at the school, the teacher, Mrs. Kovac, greeted us both warmly and said, "Max talks about you all the time, Celine. He says you help brands find their voices." I smiled. He listens more than I thought. Brent gave a stiff chuckle. That night, as we pulled into the driveway, he sat in the car longer than usual. Engine still running. "I've been thinking," he said. "About everything." I stayed quiet. He hesitated. "I've always been the one with the job title. The office. The name on the email signature. And I thought that meant something. I thought that made me more." I looked at him. He wasn't trying to manipulate. He was unraveling. Processing. "But watching you lately," he said, his voice softer than I'd heard in months, "I see now that I never really understood what building something from nothing looks like. And I'm sorry I didn't respect it until other people did." It was the first time his apology didn't feel like a PR statement. But still, I didn't give him what he was hoping for, whatever flicker of hope he still held on to that this version of us could go back to how it was. Because I couldn't go back. And deep down, I think he finally understood that. A few days later, he asked if we could talk logistics. "Should I start looking at rentals?" he asked, not with anger. Just reality. "Yes," I said. It was the calmest we'd ever been about something so heavy. We agreed on a timeline. Something that would be gentle for Max. He'd stay nearby. We'd share the schedule evenly. No lawyers yet. Just grown-up honesty. Long overdue. And as all of this unfolded, my career blooming, my personal life reshaping, something else unexpected started to happen. I began getting messages from women I didn't know. Strangers. Random followers. Some with 2 kids. Some with none. Some with jobs they hated and dreams they hadn't spoken out loud. They sent paragraphs. Told me they'd seen the video, or read the article, or heard me on the podcast. They told me they'd quit jobs, started blogs, taken courses, pitched ideas. Not because I told them to, but because seeing someone else do the thing made it real for them. And every time I read one of those messages, I thought about the night at Canlis. About the cold, polished laughter. About the look on Brent's face when he realized I wasn't laughing along. He thought that night he'd taken something from me. But all he really did was wake me up. It was strange how peaceful everything became once the chaos settled. Once Brent officially moved out, the house didn't feel empty. It felt breathable. Quiet in a way that didn't feel lonely, but clear. Like I could finally hear my own thoughts again. He found a small apartment a few blocks away. Nothing dramatic. Just enough space for Max to have his own room when he stayed over. The transition for our son was surprisingly smooth. Kids adapt quickly when the adults around them stop walking on eggshells. Brent and I kept it civil: schedules, school updates, drop-offs. Nothing more. No questions, no nostalgia, no pretend. We were done pretending. One day, while I was picking Max up from Brent's place, I noticed a stack of printouts on his dining table. Familiar layouts. Familiar colors. My work. Specifically, one of my campaign templates, the exact layout I'd used for MintMine's launch. Down to the font and image placement. I didn't say anything at the time. Just gathered Max's things, kissed him on the head, and left. That night, I opened my laptop and did some digging. Brent's firm had launched a new campaign for a fintech client, and the visuals were a blatant ripoff of my work. Same structure. Similar copy. Even the messaging pillars I'd outlined in my private client deck were paraphrased and repackaged like it was their own. And guess whose name was listed as campaign strategist on the press release? Brent. It was almost funny. Almost. But this time, I didn't cry. I didn't freeze. I didn't shrink. I took screenshots. Gathered documentation. Sent it to my IP attorney, a sharp woman named Lee who didn't waste time with pleasantries. She took one look at the files and said, "Oh, this is textbook infringement. We've got them." Within a week, Brent's firm received a formal cease and desist. Professional. Tight. No anger. Just legal muscle with teeth. A few days later, I received a panicked email from Craig's executive assistant, requesting a quick call to clarify concerns. I didn't respond. Instead, Lee did. The firm pulled the campaign. Quietly. No press release this time. But the real satisfaction came 2 weeks later. A mutual connection in the industry, someone I hadn't even spoken to in years, forwarded me a message from Craig. Apparently, he was shopping around for an outside branding consultant to help rebuild trust with their partners and modernize their strategy. My name came up. He wanted to schedule a meeting. I said yes. Not because I needed the work, but because I wanted to look the man in the eye. We met at a sleek co-working space in downtown Seattle, a place with exposed concrete and kombucha on tap. Craig looked thinner than I remembered. Less smug. He extended a hand. "Celine. Glad we could connect." I shook it. Firm. No smile. He launched into a pitch about how the firm was evolving, how they respected independent creatives more than ever, how he believed in second chances and fresh starts. I let him talk. Then, when he was done, I slid a single-page printout across the table. It was a rate sheet. At the bottom, in bold, it said, "Non-negotiable for clients who publicly mocked my career." He read it. Went pale. "Is this a joke?" he asked. "No," I said. "It's a boundary." He cleared his throat. "These numbers are high. They reflect my value." He was silent for a moment, then said, "Would you really walk away from a 5-figure contract just to make a point?" I smiled. I already made the point. This meeting was just the period at the end of the sentence. And then I stood up, collected my things, walked out. Later that week, I donated part of my recent earnings to a women's entrepreneurship nonprofit. They were hosting a workshop for stay-at-home moms looking to re-enter the workforce or start something of their own. They asked if I'd come speak. I said yes. I stood at the front of the room, facing a group of women who looked just like I used to, tired, hopeful, unsure if their dreams still had room to breathe. I told them the truth. That I'd built something valuable. That I'd been dismissed. That I'd been mocked. And that I had won, not by fighting dirty, not by getting even, but by becoming undeniable. After the event, a woman came up to me, eyes glassy. "My husband calls my Etsy shop a hobby. Said no one makes real money selling candles." I smiled and handed her my card. "Tell him to Google me." That night, I walked home feeling lighter than I had in years. The city hummed around me. People moved through the streets with headphones, coffee cups, groceries, their own stories unfolding.